1. The psychology of people-pleasing, a fear rooted in rejection. The desire to be liked isn't inherently wrong. After all, human beings are social creatures. We are wired to connect, to belong, to coexist within a community. Yet when our sense of self becomes entangled with the need for external approval, what begins as a natural instinct turns into a psychological trap. From a young age, we're conditioned to equate our worth with how others perceive us. Approval from parents, praise from teachers, validation from peers. These shape our understanding of who we are and what we should be. Slowly, subtly, our identity begins to depend not on who we are, but on who others think we are. We become performers, adapting, pleasing, adjusting ourselves to fit molds we didn't create. We laugh when expected, suppress disagreement to avoid conflict, and hide aspects of our personalities that might provoke disapproval. And all of it is driven by a deep, often unspoken fear, the fear of rejection. Rejection is painful not only because it hurts emotionally, but because it threatens the illusion that we need to be accepted to survive, to matter. The idea that being disliked, misunderstood, or disapproved of is a kind of death to the self. So we comply, we conform, we chase harmony at the expense of authenticity. But according to Stoic philosophy, this fear is not only irrational, it is harmful. Epictetus reminds us that our opinions, judgments, inner choices are the only things truly within our control. The thoughts and reactions of others, entirely outside our grasp. To make our peace of mind depend on the approval of others is to surrender our freedom. In the Stoic view, needing to be liked is not a virtue, it's a vulnerability, because when we live for the applause of the crowd, we become easy to manipulate. Every praise lifts us. Every criticism crushes us. Our emotional stability becomes hostage to forces we cannot direct. This is not a life of reason. It is a life of emotional slavery. Marcus Aurelius warned against this subtle surrender when he wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." That is the paradox of the people pleaser. Constantly betraying oneself to be accepted by others, even when that acceptance is fickle, shallow, or conditional. To a Stoic, the pursuit of universal approval is not just futile, it is dangerous. It distracts from what truly matters, living in accordance with virtue, integrity, and reason. You are not obligated to please everyone. You are only obligated to be just, honest, courageous, and wise, whether or not others applaud you for it. Freedom, in the deepest sense, begins when we stop asking, "Will they like me?" and start asking, "Is this the right thing to do?" That is the Stoic path, not toward being liked by all, but toward being free within oneself. 2. Marcus Aurelius, you were not born to please others. In his meditations, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself of a simple yet radical truth. You were not born to please others. These words, though ancient, still resonate deeply in today's world, where so many live trapped in the expectations of others, constantly seeking approval while quietly eroding their sense of self. Imagine being Marcus, ruler of a vast empire, answerable not just to a government, but to armies, citizens, senators, enemies, and his own family. Every day, thousands of opinions swirled around him. Every gesture, every silence, every law carried the weight of scrutiny. Yet even under such overwhelming pressure, he recognized that living to satisfy those expectations was a direct path to inner disintegration. He wrote, "You were not made to huddle in the corner and worry about what others think." This is not just advice, it's a declaration of autonomy. It's a call to reclaim the self from the clutches of public opinion. For Marcus, a meaningful life could only be lived in accordance with nature, specifically human nature, which he defined as rational, moral, and inwardly governed. From a Stoic point of view, your task is not to become whatever others desire you to be. Your task is to become aligned with reason, to live in a way that is guided by clarity, virtue, and inner coherence. This doesn't mean being antisocial or indifferent to others' feelings. Rather, it means understanding the limits of your responsibility. You owe people fairness, honesty, and respect, but not your identity, not your integrity. Many of us live as though disappointment from others is a kind of moral failure. We feel guilty when we don't meet someone's expectation. But Marcus flips that assumption. If someone is disappointed because you didn't live according to their script, it's not your fault. It's their error in judgment, expecting you to become an extension of their desires. He would say, let them be disappointed. That is their burden, not yours. This is the essence of Stoic courage, to act rightly, not reactively, to speak truthfully, not flatteringly, to walk your path without needing a cheerleading crowd. It is not arrogance, it is clarity, the recognition that you have only one life and to spend it performing for others is a betrayal of your soul. In today's culture of likes, metrics, and curated identities, this principle becomes even more urgent. We are flooded with the opinions and preferences of others 24/7. But Marcus calls us back to the inner citadel, the private domain of reason, where we decide not based on popularity, but on principle. You were not born to make everyone happy. You were born to fulfill your potential as a rational, moral, sovereign being. That may make some people uncomfortable. Let it. As long as you act justly, speak truthfully, and live with integrity, you owe no one your obedience to their preferences. You were not born to live a second-hand life. You were born to live your own. 3. Epictetus. The free person is not enslaved by praise or blame. Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, was born into slavery. His early life was not his own. His body, his labor, even his movements were controlled by others. Yet, he would become one of the strongest voices on the nature of true freedom. To Epictetus, freedom had nothing to do with whether you were legally bound or physically chained. Real freedom, he argued, is psychological and moral. It's the ability to remain inwardly sovereign no matter what others say, think, or do. In his discourses, Epictetus declared, "Only the educated are free." But by educated, he didn't mean those with academic degrees. He meant those who have trained themselves through discipline and philosophy to stop depending on external validation. A free person in the Stoic sense is someone who acts not out of a desire for praise or a fear of criticism, but out of principle and reason. When you live to please others, you surrender your inner authority. You let the unpredictable tides of others' opinions direct your behavior, your choices, and ultimately, your self-worth. Epictetus saw this as a kind of voluntary slavery, chaining yourself not to a master, but to the applause and approval of the crowd. You become a puppet, dancing to the strings of other people's moods and values. The Stoics believed that true power lies in mastering your own responses, not in trying to manipulate the reactions of others. Epictetus taught his students to examine every impulse that came from a need for recognition. Why do you want to be praised? He would ask. Is it because you're not convinced that what you did was good unless someone tells you it is? For Epictetus, the wise person does the right thing simply because it is right, not because it will be celebrated. He insisted that if a deed requires applause to feel meaningful, it's not a deed rooted in virtue, but in ego. And if someone's disapproval can make you doubt your path, then your commitment to virtue was never solid to begin with. This teaching is particularly vital in an age addicted to external feedback. Social media has trained us to value ourselves in likes and shares, but Epictetus reminds us that such measurements are fickle. What's admired today is forgotten tomorrow. If you let praise feed you, you must also let criticism starve you. To become truly free, then, you must stop bargaining your peace of mind for temporary validation. Learn to stand still in the storm of praise and blame. Learn to say thank you or noted and continue walking your path without deviation. This isn't indifference, it's maturity. It's the realization that no one else can live your life for you, so their judgments, while perhaps interesting, cannot be your compass. Epictetus's wisdom is both sobering and liberating. He doesn't promise comfort. In fact, he assumes life will be full of misunderstanding and resistance. But he offers something better than comfort: dignity. The dignity of living according to your own values, undisturbed by the noise of the crowd. To be free is to stop asking, "What will they think of me?" and instead ask, "What does reason demand of me?" That is the essence of Stoic freedom, and the path to becoming untouchable in a world obsessed with image. 4. Expectations, the invisible chains we place upon ourselves. One of the most subtle yet pervasive traps in life is the burden of expectation. Unlike direct commands or obvious coercion, expectations wear a gentler mask. They disguise themselves as love, as morality, as duty. A parent doesn't tell you outright to abandon your dreams. They hope you'll choose a safer path. Society doesn't jail you for being different. It quietly alienates, excludes, and pressures you to conform. Friends don't always say, "Change for me," but they often imply, "Why aren't you more like what I need you to be?" At first glance, these expectations seem reasonable. A stable career, good manners, empathy toward others. Aren't these valid goals? In many cases, yes. But the danger arises when we fail to distinguish between what truly matters to us and what has been projected onto us by others. If we cannot make this distinction, we risk spending our entire lives reacting to others' hopes, fears, and standards, never examining whether they align with who we really are. As Stoics understood, the expectation of others can easily become a form of internalized control, and unlike external oppression, it's more insidious, because it wears the face of your loved ones, your culture, even your own self-image. Epictetus warned, "If you wish to be free, then you must stop believing that others' opinions are your business." The more we internalize expectations without inspection, the more we surrender our freedom. We become prisoners in golden cages, polished, applauded, but ultimately confined. What makes expectations particularly dangerous is that they often appeal to our need to belong. We're social beings. No one enjoys being the odd one out. That's why expectations often succeed. They don't need to punish us. They merely hint at disapproval, like at withdrawal of affection, at judgment. That's usually enough to make us comply. But the Stoics offer a different way. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. Be indifferent to what makes no difference." Living according to the values of the crowd, even if they're wrapped in family, friendship, or societal morality, will lead you to a fragmented existence. You'll always be split, a version of you for them, and a hidden version of you that never fully emerges. And this is the tragedy. You may reach the end of your life realizing you never truly lived it. You were merely enacting a script written by others and edited by fear. True Stoic strength is not rebellion for its own sake. It is discernment. It is asking, with deep seriousness, is this value mine, or did I inherit it without question? The Stoic doesn't reject all expectations, only the ones that compromise their integrity. They live not to offend others, but to stay aligned with reason, virtue, and inner clarity. You cannot live a life of purpose while constantly apologizing for who you are, nor can you reach your potential by shrinking yourself to fit the shapes others prefer. The world may never stop imposing its expectations, but you can stop mistaking them for your own voice. And that is the beginning of freedom. 5. Seneca. The wise live by reason, not by the crowd. In his letters to Lucilius, Seneca consistently and unflinchingly critiques humanity's dependence on public approval and societal norms. To him, one of the greatest tragedies is not that life is hard, but that people waste it trying to live according to standards they never truly examined. Rather than confronting their fears or choosing the path that aligns with their nature, most choose the comfort of conformity. They follow the crowd, not out of agreement, but out of fear. Fear of judgment, fear of exclusion, fear of being different. Seneca challenges this passive surrender. He insists that true wisdom begins when one stops asking, "Will they like me?" and starts asking, "Is this reasonable? Is this just? Is this worthy of a rational being?" That distinction is at the heart of Stoic ethics. A wise person does not shape their behavior based on whether the masses will approve. The wise live by logos, reason, clarity, inner discipline, even if that means walking alone. This is not a call to arrogance or antisocial rebellion. Seneca isn't advocating a life of isolation or contempt for others. Instead, he draws a line between popularity and peace of mind. Many people are adored and celebrated, and yet inwardly miserable because they live lives not of their own making. Meanwhile, the Stoic may go unnoticed, even disliked, but enjoys the calm of someone who knows they are in harmony with nature and with themselves. Seneca saw clearly that the crowd is often irrational, swayed by emotion, fashion, and short-term gratification. To follow the crowd, then, is to surrender your rational nature, to allow your moral compass to be redirected by noise. He writes, "What is popular is not always right, and what is right is rarely popular." This is the Stoic challenge, to stand firm when everything around you pulls you toward mediocrity. That is why Seneca was not impressed by praise or status. He knew how hollow public applause could be. It is conditional, inconsistent, and often awarded to those who entertain or conform, not those who pursue wisdom. The Stoic doesn't chase recognition because they understand that recognition is an unstable measure of worth. Instead, they ask themselves daily, have I acted with virtue? Have I fulfilled my role as a rational being? This shift in metric from external applause to internal alignment is radical. It frees you from the exhausting treadmill of public approval. It gives you the courage to make unpopular but necessary choices. And most importantly, it brings a kind of moral independence that few ever attain. Seneca does not claim that this path is easy. Quite the opposite. It demands strength, vigilance, and frequent self-examination. But he is clear. The pain of being misunderstood is far less than the agony of betraying your own reason. The discomfort of walking alone is far more bearable than the regret of never having walked your own path. In the end, the Stoic chooses clarity over comfort, integrity over image. They understand that the cost of conformity is their soul, and for the wise, that price is too high. 6. A fragile ego is always begging for validation. When you don't know who you are, you'll let others define you. And when you're unsure of your own worth, you'll chase the approval of everyone around you, hoping that their acceptance will somehow confirm your value. But this is a dangerous illusion, and one that leads to inner fragility rather than strength. Every nod of approval you receive today can become a burden tomorrow. The applause that lifts you now may soon be the expectation that chains you. This is the trap of a weak ego. It lives off praise like a parasite, growing dependent on it to feel alive. A person who hasn't built their self-respect on solid ground will always be at the mercy of others' opinions. When they are praised, they feel inflated. When criticized, they collapse. Their emotional life becomes a volatile roller coaster, driven not by reason, but by the ever-changing winds of public sentiment. One harsh word can ruin their day. One moment of silence can trigger panic. In essence, their identity becomes a puppet, its strings pulled by the desires, reactions, and expectations of those around them. Stoic philosophy offers an antidote to this instability. Build your worth not on validation, but on virtue. Your value, the Stoics insist, comes not from how others see you, but from your capacity to live according to reason. A human being is not defined by fame, wealth, or likability. They are defined by their ability to think clearly, act ethically, and accept with dignity what lies beyond their control. Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius all echoed this truth. You do not need permission from others to be honorable. You do not need applause to live a good life. And you certainly do not need everyone to agree with you to be at peace. What you need is alignment with your rational nature, that inner compass which tells you this is right, even when the world says otherwise. If you act with integrity and are still disliked, that's not a crisis, it's a reality of life. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you can act justly and still be hated. What matters is not that you're misunderstood, but that you didn't betray yourself just to be understood. In fact, being disliked for doing what's right is far more noble than being praised for what's popular. So the Stoic does not beg for recognition. They do not grovel at the feet of approval. They do not adjust their values to fit the mood of the crowd. Instead, they stand firm, calm, grounded, centered not in ego, but in ethos. In a culture addicted to likes, followers, and public validation, this way of life is radical, even revolutionary. But it is also freeing. Because once you stop needing others to confirm your worth, you become unshakable. You become sovereign over your own peace, and that is a kind of power no external force can take away. If you've done the right thing, and you're still resented, smile. That's not failure, that's freedom. 7. Inner stillness is the reward of those who refuse to be slaves to the gaze of others. The Stoic does not live by the emotions of others. They do not make their peace conditional upon approval, nor do they allow their worth to rise and fall with the shifting tides of public opinion. Why? Because they understand something essential. People are guided by emotion more than reason, driven by biases, ignorance, and projections they often don't even recognize in themselves. To be judged by such a mind is not proof of guilt, and to be praised by it is no guarantee of virtue. What others think of you says more about them than about you, and to make their gaze your compass is to live as a puppet, not a person. Marcus Aurelius warned us clearly. Don't let yourself be pulled like a puppet by every little string of praise or blame. He knew well that fame is fragile, that reputation is borrowed, and that dignity only exists when it is rooted in something deeper, in one's inner clarity. There will always be people who misunderstand you. Some will dislike you simply because your presence disturbs their illusions. Others may admire you for the wrong reasons. If you base your peace on being liked, you will never have peace, because approval is fleeting, and people change. The crowd that cheers today may boo tomorrow, not because you changed, but because they did. True inner stillness begins the moment you stop dancing to the rhythm of others' opinions. It begins when you ask just one thing: is my conscience clear? Not, do they approve? Not, do they understand? But did I live today with honesty, with reason, with virtue? If the answer is yes, then nothing else matters. This is not arrogance. It is strength, the kind that does not shout but stands quietly, unmoved. The kind that does not need to fight for validation because it no longer begs for it. It is the composure of one who knows that being misunderstood is not the end of the world, and in fact may be the cost of living authentically. The Stoic accepts that they cannot control how others think, but they can control how they respond. And they choose calm. They choose clarity. They choose self-respect over popularity. Even when hated, they do not hate. Even when excluded, they do not despair. Even when insulted, they do not shrink. Because their foundation is not built on applause. It is built on logos, on reason, on something no insult can reach. In a noisy world where everyone seems to chase attention, the Stoic walks another path, one of quiet resolve. They do not need to shout their worth. They live it. And in that quiet, something extraordinary arises. Peace. Not the peace of comfort or consensus, but the deep, inviolable peace of a person who is no longer anyone's puppet. No longer at the mercy of glances, comments, or judgments. That kind of stillness is not given by the world. It is earned, and it is sacred. 8. Live to be worthy, not to be agreed with. You were not born to be a canvas painted by the crowd. You were not placed on this earth to mold yourself endlessly to the expectations, tastes, and biases of others. Stoic philosophy reminds us that living is not a public relations campaign. It is a moral act. It is not about winning consensus. It is about choosing integrity. There is a quiet dignity in a life lived according to one's principles, even when no one applauds. That's why Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do the right thing, even if no one notices." That's how the universe works. To live rightly is to act not for attention, but for alignment, with reason, with virtue, with your own conscience. But that's not easy in a world addicted to validation. From childhood, we're conditioned to equate approval with value. A smile from a teacher, applause from a group, likes on a post. These become metrics of worth. Gradually, we trade our instincts for performance. We silence our doubts to avoid conflict. We conform not because we believe, but because we fear standing alone. Stoicism rejects this quiet form of slavery. It teaches that your moral worth is not a democracy. It doesn't rise or fall with other people's opinions. The truth is this: if you live in fear of disapproval, you will never live freely. You'll always wear masks, shapeshift to fit the room, compromise what matters just to avoid a raised eyebrow or a disapproving glance. But dignity isn't found in being liked. It's found in being honest. Honesty with yourself first. The Stoics ask you to turn inward. Is this action rational? Is it just? Is it courageous? If yes, proceed. If no, stop, regardless of applause or criticism. That's the measure. That's the bar. Recognition that comes as a result of virtue is a fine thing, but it's not the goal. And if it never comes, you lose nothing, because living with integrity is its own reward. There's a kind of peace that settles in when you know you are not performing anymore, when you are no longer negotiating your values for applause. People will misunderstand you. Some may mock your silence. Others may dislike your clarity. But if your actions are aligned with your highest principles, their reaction is not your burden. Your duty is not to please, it is to live rightly. Your responsibility is not to fit in, it is to be whole. In the end, you owe the world nothing but your honesty, and you owe yourself the courage to live it. So stop asking, will they agree? Start asking, is this right? That shift, small, quiet, internal, is the beginning of real freedom. It is the path of the Stoic, it is the path of the self-respecting, and it is the only path worth walking.